This might end up being the greatest Thursday night football game of all time.
You're not starting him over Jared Goff.
I got done dirty by the producers on this one. All right.
Quit blaming them.
Here's what happened.
In most weeks, Tyrone Tracy would be a running back one.
I don't know why more people don't have obscene honey collections.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Thursday. Happy week 10, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartiz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to get through the risers, the fallers, Freedman's favorites, and sicko starts at all the positions in our ranking edition episode of the week. So joining me to accomplish that very goal, we have Dwain McFarland, Matthew Freedman. The gang is back together ahead of what I honestly think, guys, is too good of a Thursday night football game. Bengals at the freaking Ravens, or Ravens at the Bengals, whichever one it is. It is the Ravens, but Dwain, too good, man. Too good.
And thank you for throwing to me first. I didn't want Freedman to bring us down after really getting excited about the Thursday night game. I'm sure he has some sort of doom and gloom about what's going to happen in this game and how we're not going to hit the over. It's going to be the normal wet blanket Freedman. But yes, let's take a moment to embrace this Thursday night game. We've got Joe Burrow coming out here. The last time he faced this offense or this defense, 5 touchdown passes, like it was a 3-point game that the Ravens squeaked out. So yeah, this is an absolute gem for a Thursday night game. Now, Freedman, tell us why we're all wrong.
Dwain, you are wrong in assuming that I was going to be so negative on this game. This might end up being the greatest Thursday night football game of all time. In contrarian fashion, I am on the over. 52.5 for the total is just not high enough. I have this projected at 55. So I'm very enthusiastic for this rare Thursday night football gem.
These teams combined for 79 points back when they met in week 5. That is still the highest combined score in the NFL this season. So, all right, guys, I guess you're excited. I would have preferred, we didn't risk international conflict and we just had Giants-Panthers taking this place on Thursday night, but I guess we will see what happens. Actually do have some news to break down from this very game, though. Isaiah likely out with a hamstring injury. So, Dwain's certainly been a frustrating season for Mark Andrews. That said, you take away his fellow competition at tight end. Are we back in treating Mark Andrews like the tight end that we drafted him in the top 5 a few short months ago?
Yeah, I think we're as close as we're going to be to that, Ian. We'll see. I mean, his targets per route run still aren't where they've been historically, but we had seen a little bit of an uptick over the previous 3 games before last week. We actually had him averaging 16.8 fantasy points per game over that stretch. Route participation was up. Got a dud last weekend, only gave you 4.6 points, but with Isaiah likely out, I mean, we're probably looking at 75 to 80% route participation for Mark Andrews in a game with this massive game total. Could be a shootout. Yeah, I think there's a lot of optimism here. I've got him as a mid-range tight end 1 this weekend based on this news of likely being out. So most likely, see what I did there? If you have Mark Andrews, you are getting him into your lineup tonight. He is on most rosters. I went and checked just to see if people had actually given up on Andrews yet. He is rostered in most leagues, so people haven't taken it that far. So a lot of you probably are carrying 2 tight ends because I can't guess that you've just kept starting Mark Andrews through all of this, but this is your week to plug him into your lineup.
Freedman, you do have Andrews ranked the lowest with our team of consensus rankers at the tight end 10. I'm the highest, tight end 5. I would only be starting Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Trey McBride, and Cade Otton ahead of him. Any particular wet blanket reason you got here, or just, a fact that, haven't exactly seen the guy even get more than 5 targets in a game this year, maybe taking away Isaiah likely isn't going to completely change that.
Yeah, as you said, he's not the same Mark Andrews this year, and it just feels like it could be a massive Derrick Henry game incoming, and lots of other weapons now for Lamar Jackson to throw to. They don't need to pepper Mark Andrews with targets the way they did 2 or 3 years ago. So nothing against Mark Andrews. If you have him, you're probably starting him. Just a few more guys I would rather start ahead of him in comparison to some of the other rankers.
I will say, fellas, he looked good last week. Just a couple of the routes against the Broncos, and ESPN Open Score does have him as the best separator at the position this year. So maybe, just maybe, get some second half fireworks from someone who, hasn't given us all that much in the first half of the year at least. Other Thursday night football news, we do have Lamar Jackson playing as expected, but he was on the injury report with that knee injury. Maybe we will see the debut of Ravens running back Keaton Mitchell coming back from that horrific leg injury last season. He's officially questionable, but did practice in full all week. The only other really notable news, though, would be T. Higgins doubtful with the quad, leaving Freedman. Mike Gesicki essentially as the number 2 pass catcher in Cincinnati. How optimistic are you about Gesicki? Again, kind of repeating last week's just amazing performance.
Yeah, he has looked amazing when T. Higgins has been out. And on top of that, tight end Eric All, rookie who was getting some decent playing time, he is now out for the season with a knee injury. So you add the absence of All on top of the absence of the Higgins, and it's just really significant. In his 4 Bengals games without Higgins, Gesicki, 282 yards, 2 touchdowns receiving, 27 targets. And you look at the matchup, which is also very good. Last year, Geno Stone was the guy for the Ravens who covered tight ends a little bit more than people kind of anticipated. Kyle Hamilton was more of a slot cornerback. This year, Hamilton is the team's primary tight end defender. And with that, the Ravens are number 27 in defensive pass DVOA against tight ends. So a great situational spot in terms of the matchup. And then also Gesicki could have extra targets coming his way with no Eric All and no T. Higgins.
Dwain, what was the fantasy points per game stat without Higgins you were throwing around for Gesicki?
Yeah, 15.3 fantasy points per game in the games without T. Higgins. So yeah, he's a high-end tight end 1 in games without T. Higgins. I mean, it's hard, honestly, to not have him in your top 5, knowing that Higgins is probably not playing, especially like Freedman mentioned, in this game environment.
We have them top 6, so pretty much on the same page there. Guys, that was, again, the major news item ahead of Thursday night, but a lot else did happen on Wednesday, so quickly going to run through some of the biggest happenings from that. Starting with Dak Prescott, apparently his hamstring got removed from his bone, at least partially, which sounds incredibly painful. Partial avulsion, I guess, is the medical term there. So shout out Jane Slater for that report, but yeah, it sounds like 4 weeks might not even be enough to get him back healthy. Bucs quarterback Baker Mayfield dealing with a toe injury was not able to practice on Wednesday. Just keep an eye on that. Caleb Williams not listed on the injury report. That is good news there. Trevor Lawrence hopes to play against the Vikings, even though he is dealing with a left shoulder injury. And Bryce Young will start in Germany against the Giants. Again, just such a treat we're giving to that Munich crowd. Also note that Will Levis will practice more this week per head coach Brian Callahan. At running back Christian McCaffrey, limited in practice, but head coach Kyle Shanahan did say that he has no pain. Looking good there. And also seemingly dealing with no pain, Jordan Mason, who practiced in full with that shoulder injury. We'll be talking a bit more about that projected split here later in the show. Commanders running back Brian Robinson is limited in practice, but Dan Quinn did say that the signs are looking right for him to play this Sunday. Meanwhile, Jonathan Brooks activated the 53-man roster. We'll see what kind of role his NFL debut includes. Chargers running back Gus Edwards said he feels 100%, although limited in practice. And apparently, guys, you'll never believe this, Kendre Miller's second IR stint might have had a little bit more to do with Dennis Allen than anything. Apparently, for all intents and purposes, the feeling is that Miller is currently at 100% and could be on the field. However, because he was put on IR, because Dennis Allen hates him, he's not going to be ready until at least December 8th. Over at wide receiver, we have the Houston Texans beat reporter Aaron Wilson saying that Nico Collins passed all of his tests for the hamstring. Still to be determined if he does play in week 10, but so far so good. Guys who are limited in practice, 49ers wide receivers Deebo Samuel and Juwan Jennings, Cowboys wide receiver CeeDee Lamb, Falcons wide receiver Drake London, Bills wide receiver Amari Cooper, and Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown. All good news there, but not so good news for the other Philly stud, Devonta Smith, not practicing with a hamstring injury. Yikes. Also not practicing essentially every Bucs wide receiver, Keon Coleman, Darius Slayton, Adam Thielen, and Juju Smith-Schuster. And we'll also find out more about Chris Olave, meeting with some specialists regarding his, again, second concussion in, I believe, 3 weeks. And finally, Eagles tight end Dallas Goedert is expected to return to action from that hamstring injury. So Eagles maybe get down Devonta Smith, but back Dallas Goedert. We'll see if Jalen Hurts can keep on playing some really good football like he has over the past few weeks. So that was the news, everybody. Now, before we get to our rankings, going to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Knockaround. Get my perp shades on. Shout out to the Ravens. These are honestly some of my favorite ones of the 32 official NFL team sunglasses, but you can find your favorite team or maybe your least favorite team, whatever floats your boat, over at knockaround.com. Guys, they have polarized lens for less than $50, and I really can't speak enough about the high quality. I mean, not even just, the UV 400 protection, but the frames and everything, guys. Legit, elite sunglasses over here at Knockaround. So again, you can check out the officially licensed NFL collection, or if you want to take a look at Dwayne's beautiful mug on the other side of the screen, also just got some cool, more regular sunglasses if that is what floats your boat. So either way, you can use code LIFE for free shipping. Again, only at knockaround.com. All right, it is rankings, risers, fallers, Freedman's favorites, and sicko starts, as always, presented by DraftKings. So appreciate you guys over there. Fellow, kicking things off with a riser, fresh off bye, and actually getting all of his healthy teammates back. Dwain, talk about Brock Purdy and the expectations against a Buccaneers defense that, let's face it, hasn't been slowing down anyone in recent weeks.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say there's a lot of risers this week as far as the quarterback position goes. We've got a lot of guys getting healthy, or their teammates are getting healthy, or they've got good trends going. So folks can check out the full article. Also check out Freedman's favorites over at FantasyLife.com. You can see a lot more about different players. But Brock Purdy's the guy that I wanted to highlight on the show today, Ian, because number one, what you just mentioned, he's getting all of his weapons back. But even without the weapons, this man has been averaging 263 yards per game. And he's had a lot of these games where he's had one or two of his top weapons out. Obviously been without CMC the entire season, hoping to get him back. Deebo Samuel as well as Juwan Jennings, who kind of broke out earlier in the year, and then he got a hip injury and had to miss the last 2 games. So this will be the healthiest that we have seen the 49ers offense. He's been a good player. And now you get this matchup against the Buccaneers. They give up the second most passing yards per game, Ian, 274 yards. They give up that's the third most. They give up the second most touchdown passes per game. And then you just look at odds makers. They also just love the 49ers this weekend. They have the second highest team total on the slate, guys. So all we're doing is we're taking the game total, and then we take the spread between those two things, and then we divide it across the two teams. And that's how you get to your team total. And that's just what we use to project how many points we think that team is going to score for the week. So a lot of opportunity here for Purdy to put up massive yardage numbers as well as multiple touchdowns through the air. I've got him in that mid-range QB1 territory, Ian. I think you could get him as high as like 5. I think I have him at 6 right now. But pretty much if you have him, unless you've got one of the absolute studs, you're starting Brock Purdy this weekend.
Certainly feeling good in our consensus ranks. I have him the lowest, but it's only QB7. Freedman, you're right there with Dwain at QB6. So I push back on the idea over the years that Brock Purdy is some system quarterback, because all it takes is just watching the dude play, running around sideline to sideline, throwing the ball downfield. Really doesn't, match what some of the slander out there speaks of. But Freedman, even if you do want to take that approach, turns out the system's pretty great once you get all the healthy guys involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And adding in Ricky Pearsall, who on his own was a first-round wide receiver. And so it's not that, you are thrilled to be without Brandon Ayuk, but at least conceivably there's someone who can step in and still maintain the level in that offense of the entire unit being able to produce. What is intriguing to me in this game, you had on Monday Night Football, the Chiefs hosting the Buccaneers. Chiefs were favored by about 8 points. You have San Francisco on the road playing the Buccaneers. 49ers favored by about 5.5 or 6 points. Even though the 49ers have struggled relative to expectations this season, even though they're about 500, even though they've been injured, the market right now is pricing the 49ers basically as if they are just as good as the Chiefs. And I think that is significant. The 49ers are still very much the team that we thought they would be entering the season, even though they've underperformed. The market is reflecting that, and I think we see Brock Purdy play to that level this week.
Good stuff on Purdy. But, guys, we do have a faller who we cannot be quite as excited about. It is Bears QB1, Caleb Williams. And Dwain, part of my 32 Facts for 32 Teams article that will be live on the website on Friday. I was just looking at his EPA per dropback basically by week, because there was a stark improvement going on. You look at it from week 1 before their bye, 29th, 30th, 21st, 13th, back-to-back third-place finishes. Then we had the bye week. 33rd, reminder, only 32 teams in the NFL, and then 29th over these past 2 weeks. What happened, Dwain?
Yeah, look, life is just too short to have Caleb Williams in your starting lineup in fantasy. Like, it's a onesie position. We can find something that we know is more consistent, right? Here's the challenge, Ian. Like, it's a very Jekyll and Hyde kind of situation. And I mean, we're talking about manic swings. Week 1, QB 33. Week 2, QB 28. Week 3, QB 11. Oh, okay. Maybe this guy's good. Nope. QB 22. QB 6. Okay, let's get him in the lineup next week. And you were actually rewarded. He gave you a QB1 finish in week 6. Coming off that bye week, they're going to put in some new wrinkles. Just take this offense even further. Shane Waldron maybe finally turning things around, figuring it all out. No, just kidding. QB 28. Then follows that up with a QB 29 or QB 26 finish in week 9, Ian. And these have been against like beatable defenses. It's not like the Bears have been playing the toughest defenses in the league. These are all matchups that you would think at least, look, even though you don't have a great game, Caleb Williams should give us like a QB 15 finish, right? And then you can survive to fight another day. The problem is he's failed to score 12 fantasy points, 12 in 5 of his 8 games. So it's just not worth it at this point. There's too many, and we just talked about it. There's so many guys moving up the ranks because they're getting healthier. I'm starting Tua over him. I'm starting Matthew Stafford over him. I mean, I'm starting Jared Goff over him. I'm starting anyone that's shown any sort of dependability. Now, look, Goff can be a little bit up and down too based on game scripts, but his ceilings have also been just as good, and he's not had as many bad floor games. So, Caleb, man, I've just moved him down. I know I was going through, you took the first pass at some of our waiver wire run yesterday, Ian, over at Real Time Sports. Guys, make sure to go check out their games. You had him dropped on several. You were marking him to drop on several teams, and I didn't disagree. I'm like, I'm done as well. I'm just done with Caleb Williams right now. Not saying we're done for Caleb Williams for his career. It's just life's too short to deal with it this year in fantasy football, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's face it; those teams aren't doing too hot anyway, Dwain. So hopefully, the likes of Justin Herbert and Russell Wilson, can help improve that. Freedman really has been a stark drop off. I mean, one of the stats I had in my manifesto article is that Bryce Young, unironically, posting better numbers than Caleb Williams over these past 2 weeks. I know the offensive line has something to do with it, but I'm looking at it right now in True Media, guys. Even over these last 2 weeks, the Bears actually have the 4th longest average time to pressure. So I'm not saying they're dealing with the world's greatest offensive line, but at some point, Freedman, the whole running around the backfield, holding the ball as long as possible, we can blame it on Shane Waldron if we want for not getting the receivers open. Maybe the receivers aren't everything they're made out to be. Regardless, the entire passing game, which of course Caleb Williams contributes to in Chicago, not looking like a group we want too much exposure to.
I want to push back just a little bit about the perspective. And I'll start by saying I'm at QB 19. Dwain is at QB 21. We are in the same arena in terms of how it is that we are ranking Caleb Williams this week. But I think the difference between Williams and Goff this week, Goff going against the Texans, Williams and Murray this week, Murray going against the Jets, I think the difference between those guys is not that great. So even though I have him ranked QB 19, could I see him finishing as like QB 13, QB 14 on the week? Like I think that's within the range of outcomes. I think he's not all that much worse this week than some of the guys that we have ranked ahead of him. I will concur with Dwayne's point about, like, do you want to put Caleb Williams in your lineup, especially that it's a wanty position? No. In Superflex, you might be in a position where you kind of have to, but I think my feeling is that he at least has a good matchup going against the Patriots, who are number 30 in defensive pass DVOA. And I'm just going to say, I think he's probably not as bad as he's looked the past 2 weeks. Like, I think it would be reasonable to assume that there is some sort of positive regression. I'm not like wanting to be super enthusiastic about Caleb Williams, but like, I do think the hate has maybe gone just a little bit too far on him to where I would say you could probably start him this week in Superflex and not hate yourself. Like, he could probably be
QB 19. You're going to push back by saying he's QB 19 and you can start him in Superflex. Thanks. Let's move on. Well, you basically just agreed but disagreed. Oh man. Yes. Like, seriously, you're not starting him over Jared Goff. Like, Jared Goff plays for the Lions. That offense scores points every week. Like, you just know there's so much
neck and neck.
I get it.
They are neck and neck in my rankings.
If you had to make that decision 10 times, how many times would you go Caleb Williams? Really, honestly?
Probably 0, but I'm saying the difference.
That's what I'm saying.
I know, but I'm saying the difference it's really not that between
close.
Them.
Yeah, no, but it's not that close.
But it's a threshold. I'm saying the difference between them is not that great, but I would prefer to go with Goff. I would prefer it, but if you had to go with Williams, you're probably not all that much worse off than if you had gone with Goff.
Okay. Dwain, I just hope you know that bringing this up, we are now going to see Caleb Williams outperform Jared Goff. That's just the way
fine. I know, and that's
works.
How it works. But that's okay. We've already established he's Jekyll and Hyde. I really don't care if he gives me a QB2 performance overall this week. I'm not starting him next week either.
Okay, guys, we've been getting really negative here. Let's get to an actual, quarterback we can be excited about. It's Freedman's favorite of the week, Daniel Jones. Go off, Freedman.
I love how the producer looked at my favorites articles and was like, I'm going to pick the nastiest guy that I could probably pick that Freedman really highlighted. I don't want to be standing for Daniel Jones. He's not good. he's probably bad. At best, he is mediocre. In the first half last week, I'm not saying anything that people don't know. Like, he had 0 yards passing on 6 attempts. Just absolute, like, Matt Saracen level of stuff. All right. But still, he ended up somehow finishing as like a top 6 fantasy quarterback last week, 174 yards passing, 2 touchdowns through the air, and then 54 yards and a touchdown rushing. Like, he's decent as a fantasy asset, right? Especially because of the running ability. A median of 6 carries, 20 yards rushing this year. That gives him a decent fantasy floor each week. And then the big thing is the matchup, right? The matchup this week going against the Panthers gives him a significant ceiling. The Panthers, number 31 in defensive dropback EPA, number 31 in defensive pass DVOA. They are exploitable. All season long, we have seen them be exploited by quarterbacks, some of them really great, some of them mediocre. They've all gone off against the Panthers. Jones cleanly falls in the bad to mediocre category, but this week it doesn't matter. And I know he's on the road, international game. If there's a place to back Jones, it has been when he has not been at home. 14-21 against the spread at home, 21-14 against the spread literally anywhere else in the universe. I probably won't watch this game. It's a disgusting game, but if I happen to turn it on, I think Jones's performance won't blind me.
Hey man, Jones this year has 4 top 12 finishes, weeks, if you will. CJ Stroud has 2. Patrick Mahomes has 1. Daniel Jones, more, QB1 finishes than CJ Stroud and Patrick Mahomes combined this year. That's an actual thing that has happened in the 2024 season. How about that? Dwain, you're going to try to outdo the sickness of Daniel Jones with someone who actually has been playing good real life football. Talk about Russell Wilson ahead of what's actually looking like a pretty fantasy friendly schedule.
Yeah, Wilson's my sicko start of the week at quarterback. And a big part of how I do this is I go look and see how often these players are in starting lineups over in Yahoo before the show. 4%. So no one's starting Russell Wilson. He's available in 82% of Yahoo leagues. So if you're dealing with a bye week this week, we got 4 teams off. This is a scenario where you could go pick him up, and I think you can start him. He threw for 264 yards against a tough Jets defense. I get it. Sauce Gardner, maybe a little overrated, guys. I totally get it. But still, go look at the Jets defense against the pass. It's one of the better units in the NFL. Comes back with 278 yards against the Giants. And so whenever you look at the scheme and you look at the way they're playing him, I actually feel like this is just a really good fit for him. And we've got George Pickens playing on the outside, kind of that DK Metcalf role. Not saying they're the same player, but they're similar archetypes, similar stylistic games. That's working out well. And then I think the real thing that's kind of, changed for me is just looking at what they're doing with Calvin Austin, moving him around, putting him in the slot, letting him run some of those deep vertical crossers, kind of like what we used to see from Tyler Lockett. Let him really use that speed. We saw a nice touchdown pass from Russ that he dropped into the bucket. Looked like that true vintage Russ a couple of weeks ago. So on that pass to Mr. Calvin Austin. So just excited about overall how they're scheming him up and the way they're letting him, honestly just play to his strengths. I think that's what they're doing the most with Russell Wilson. I think it will be interesting to see, do defenses change? They've been giving them a fair amount of man coverage, and Russ has always destroyed single high man coverage looks. Man, you give him that and he buys a little time. That's when he drops those moonshots into the bucket for like a perfect dime. And you're like, wow, how'd he get that over a cornerback that's way taller or way bigger than Tyler Lockett? And seeing that same sort of thing here right now. The Commanders defense, better under Dan Quinn. They just went out and got Marshawn Lattimore, but they've also played a lot of crappy quarterbacks over these last several weeks. They played Deshaun Watson, Andy Dalton / Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, who we just talked about. Daniel Jones has actually lit them up twice. So to Freedman's credit, Daniel Jones, he's had some good games, and they've been against the Commanders. So I'm not that worried about this matchup. I think it's neutral, if anything. I'm not calling the Commanders a tough matchup right now. So yeah, I think Russell Wilson, he's a borderline QB1 this weekend.
Not sure if we will see Marshawn Lattimore, the hamstring injury, which I think is actually a hamstring injury, not one of these injuries where, they just kind of wanted to be traded. Yeah.
Trying to get traded, yeah.
Exactly. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, guys, Commanders, Ravens, Browns, Bengals, Browns, Eagles, and Ravens down the stretch. I know, Dwayne, a couple of those Caleb Williams cuts. It was, in fact, Russell Wilson that we were targeting. So what could go wrong there? But before we move on to running backs, guys, I want to quickly show you an overview of our top 12 from our team of consensus rankers. Again, please check out our rankings over at FantasyLife.com. Cool start, sit, total help matters. And yeah, usual suspects in our top 5, Lamar, Hurts, Allen, Daniels, and Joe Burrow. mentioned Brock Purdy being a big riser this week, but also, guys, Sam Darnold once again really turning out as a start for us, facing that Jaguars defense that hasn't been slowing down just about anybody. Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, Tua, Jared Goff, and in a tough matchup against the Jets, Kyler Murray rounding out the top 12. So again, you can find all that and more over at FantasyLife.com. Before we move on to running backs, though, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill in the air, leaves falling to the ground in football every weekend. That is what fall is all about, and you can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets instantly, and you can stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. After all, DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. Sports betting is not yet available in your state. Don't worry, you can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Time for some running back chatter, guys, and we're going to start things off again, showing just a quick little overview of the position. Saquon Barkley, fresh off hurdling a man backwards, topping the list, followed by some more veterans that certainly everyone just drafted at the top of our drafts, because why wouldn't Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry be partying like it's 2018 again? Behind them, Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, and Kyron Williams rounding out our top 6. More absolute studs in Breece Hall, Mixon, JT, Christian McCaffrey down there at RB10, Aaron Jones and DeAndre Swift in the top 12. Shout out Sigmund Bloom over at Football Guys. Mentioned how there's seemingly 20 RB1s this week, and that really does seem like the case when you got guys like Tyrone Tracy in a bell cow role facing the Panthers, still only RB15. Chase Brown without Zach Moss coming in RB14. Even guys like Tony Pollard, David Montgomery, James Conner, staples in starting lineups, still not finishing higher than 22nd. So again, check all those out over at FantasyLife.com. But Dwain, want to kick things off with that Mr. RB15 Tyrone Tracy. Absolute smash spot. I know you tweeted out some of the performances of the running backs against the Panthers this year, and spoiler alert, they've been pretty good.
Yeah, they have been. I mean, and the first thing we start with is the player, right? And Tyrone Tracy over these last 3 games, since getting Devin Singletary back from his injury, he's actually got a 7.0 utilization score. And so looking at his comps historically, Ian, 22% of those have gone on to give you a top 12 running back finish. 53% have been a running back 2, so that's running back 13 through running back 24, and then 26% have ended up as a running back 3. So if you look at the majority of cases, we have a running back 2 on our hands, and that's the way I'm treating Tyrone Tracy, just from a player profile standpoint. But then you get this matchup, and it really is one of the outlier matchups for the running back position. If you check out our DVP tool, so that's defense versus position over at Fantasy Life, we've got a cool thing in there called Fantasy Boost. And what it looks at is what the defense has given up to the opposing team's running backs, right? Over or under those teams' average for the season. So you're truly getting an adjustment of what it looks like whenever you face the defense. The Panthers are the worst, Ian. They give a league-leading 7.9 point fantasy boost per game to opposing running back rooms. That's a lot of fantasy points. Now we're talking about PPR scoring there, but we do have it for half PPR as well. If that's your kind of jam, you can go check that out. But Ian, I'll just mention it real quick. I'm going to go rapid fire. Week 1, Alvin Kamara, 22 fantasy points. J.K. Dobbins, 20. Alexander Mattison, 13. Alexander Mattison actually got over 10 points against a fantasy team. Maybe that's the most telling stat of all of these, even though it's the lowest.
Might as well be 30.
Zach Moss, 18. Oh, wait, Chase Brown, same team, same week, 23 points, 18 and 23 points from these two guys. DeAndre Hopkins gave you 20, while Roshan Johnson tacked on 15. 35 points by the Bears running backs. Bijan Robinson gave you 26. Oh, wait, what about Tyler Algier? 18. 26 and 18. Are these expected fantasy points? No, these are actual fantasy points scored against this team. Brian Robinson gave you 13, but he only played 34% of the snaps that game. He was hurt. Javonte Williams, the one dud, gave you a 9. Sorry, guys. I don't want to trigger you, but that really sucked. But then Alvin Kamara last weekend, 28. So look, if you've got Tyrone Tracy, he is locked in. To your point, in most weeks, great point by Sigmund Bloom, in most weeks of any fantasy season, Tyrone Tracy would be a running back 1. It just so happens we were so loaded, A, this year at the running back position, and B, this week. That makes him more of a mid-range to high-end running back 2, but he could still give you the running back 1 performance in all of fantasy land because, man, this matchup is truly one of the ones that we do care about.
Our consensus rankers have him between RB 15 and RB 18. You guys saw the, overall kind of consensus rank going on there. But Freedman, if someone just had him straight up as the RB 4 on the week, I really couldn't complain about it.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And to your point, and to Sigmund Bloom point, so many running backs this week could be in contention for a top 5 finish. And just to put a little more context on the Panthers and just how bad they've been, they allowed to Kamara last week 215 yards in a victory, a 23-22 home victory, and they still allowed 215 yards. So things went well for the Panthers last week, and they allowed Kamara to get 215 yards. What happens when the Panthers travel across the universe to play in another country, and they're playing as significant underdogs, right? The Panthers legitimately could allow, and I don't want to be ridiculous in this, but 250 yards to the total Giants backfield, that's possible. That could legitimately happen without it being oh, what went wrong with the Panthers this week? It was oh, they were just the Panthers. So yeah, amazing matchup. And to Dwayne's point about Tyrone Tracy and the workload that he's had with Devin Singletary back, he has still been the locked in RB1 for that team. And as he mentioned, almost every other RB1 in existence has gone off when playing the Panthers. I don't know why we would expect anything different this week with Tyrone Tracy.
Checking absolutely every box we could hope for. Kind of like the opposite of our next topic, the faller of the week. It's going to be Broncos RB Javonte Williams. So Dwayne, he hasn't looked that good this year. We're not expecting much from the Broncos offense this week, and it's a really tough matchup against the Chiefs. And we heard Sean Payton say that Audric Estime could get more involved. Other than that, though, I think Javonte's really set up well.
No, I think you just summarized it. We don't need to spend any more time on Javonte Williams. Dude, that was the perfect summary. The Chiefs are the toughest matchup in the league against running backs on top of all of that. So, yeah, it's just a bad spot for Javonte.
Sounds good to me, my friend. Let's get right into Freedman's favorite, going to the Steelers. I think we're going to be talking about the Steelers here for the next couple minutes. And Freedman, you're confident enough in Najee Harris and the Steelers offense as a whole that I hear you might be in on them in the betting markets as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Talked about Russell Wilson earlier as the sicko start. And I like Najee Harris as a favorite here. The Steelers have done well historically as underdogs, and Najee Harris, I think, should be fresh coming off of the bye. I think the Steelers, number 2 in rush rate under run-obsessed offensive coordinator Arthur Smith. I think they're going to rely on the ground game in order to control the ball and keep the Commanders' offense on the sideline. I think that means a lot of usage for Harris, getting his customary workload. And even though Harris is an underdog, which means that he conceivably could be game scripted out of the contest if the Steelers find themselves in a large deficit, I just don't think that really happens. Head coach Mike Tomlin, quarterback Russell Wilson have outperformed expectations consistently throughout their careers when they have been underdogs. Tomlin as an underdog, 61-35-4 against the spread. Russell Wilson as an underdog, 40-23-2 against the spread. Especially with a smaller spread, this game is very likely going to stay competitive throughout, and I think that means Harris functions at his usual capacity. He's not an exciting player, just 4 yards per carry, 4.9 yards per target, but he has a high floor, at least 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns from scrimmage in each of his full seasons. This year he's had a minimum of 70 yards and 16 opportunities in every game, and in Wilson's 2 starts with the Steelers, Harris has looked like the best version of himself, 233 yards and a touchdown on 40 carries and 5 targets. The Commanders are number 28 in defensive rush EPA and rush success rate. You just put it all together, and I think it means we see Najee Harris do basically what he does every week and maybe a little bit better than that.
I was about to say, Freedman, for his career, not an exciting player. I'm with you there. But these last couple of weeks, man, arguably the best of his career. Starting to look a little bit more like that first-round pick out of Bama, jumping over people, breaking all sorts of tackles, making good things happen. And accordingly, Dwayne, there's been a lot more good things happening in this Russell Wilson-led Steelers offense. It helps the running game, and it helps, some of the check-down artists when you don't have Justin Fields factor into that equation, scrambling instead of checking down. So can we actually be high on both Najee Harris and Jalen Warren this week, Dwayne?
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, so I've got Jaylen Warren as my sicko start of the week, only in 7% of lineups. He's available in 55% of Yahoo leagues. Guys, this is a really good player. He's been injured for the first half of the season, and he's just now getting healthy. You just talked about it, Ian. In this game with Russell Wilson, there's a few things going on. You're not getting the big negative plays. You're not taking as many sacks. Those things kill the opportunity ratio for running backs once you get a sack on a drive. The other thing that you've got is, besides just the sacks, is just keeping them in these manageable down and distant situations, just knowing when to take a check down, when to make the right play. And Russell Wilson's been really good about that so far. So if you look at these last two games, and you mentioned it, not having Justin Fields out there also stealing part of the design rushing attempts, that means more is going to Najee Harris. More is also going to Mr. Jaylen Warren. He got 15 opportunities in week 7. That's 12 attempts and 3 targets. Then he had 11 opportunities in week 8, 8 attempts and 3 targets. Historically, Jaylen Warren would get in between 10 and 15 opportunities in a game. Ian, he's going to give you a high-end running back 3 type production, and he could give you a running back 1 week because he is one of these guys when healthy, he can break off the long plays. He's very involved right now in the passing game. That's the role he has now taken over from Najee Harris, which is really what we expected. That's the thing we thought would happen once he's healthy. 48% route participation over these last 2 games with Russ, over Najee Harris sitting at 34%. So if they do get in this game script where they trail a little bit, or it's just competitive where they know they got to throw the ball a little bit more, I think that could also help out Jaylen Warren's box score this weekend.
And also, guys, I know I say QB wins aren't a thing, but maybe running back wins are. Steelers undefeated 6-0 with Jaylen Warren this year, 0-2 without. Correlation always implies causation. Freedman taught me that once upon a time. So that was our running back news and rankings, everyone. Now we're going to get into some wide receiver goodness going on, kicking things off with our rankings overview. Going to be showing our top 12 first here. Shout out to the YouTube fam joining us today. But yeah, guys, again, usual suspects up top. Great movie. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, our one true sun god, Tyreek Hill, and yes, Malik Neighbors in that aforementioned smash spot there against the Panthers. Also, not one, but 2 Jets making the top 12. Garrett Wilson coming off arguably the greatest catch ever, wide receiver 6, and Devontae Adams sticking in there as a wide receiver 12. We'll need to keep an eye on some injuries here. We have Nico Collins, AJ Brown, and Drake London all banged up, but otherwise, fire up those Rams, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua coming in as the wide receiver 6 and 7. Elsewhere, yes, we do still believe in Josh Downs coming off, a relative dud last week, but he is as high as wide receiver 13 in our consensus rankings. Elsewhere, a bit of a downgrade for CeeDee Lamb and the Cooper Rush experience going on, but Deebo Samuel back in action, hopefully, and sitting pretty as our wide receiver 18. A couple other new names that are, again, maybe a little bit longer in the tooth, like DeAndre Hopkins coming in as our wide receiver 22. So, Dwain, let's go ahead and talk about that wide receiver 12 from before. Davante Adams coming off a great performance. That said, certainly didn't have as great, we can call them bad performances the 2 games before that. What are you expecting now this week against the Cardinals defense that, to their credit, man, sure shut down the Bears last week?
Yeah, the good thing about those 2 duds before from a Davante was the underlying data was still telling us positive things, Ian. The target share is pretty crazy. In 3 games with the Jets, 27%. Now, a big part of that is the built-in chemistry, right, between him and Aaron Rodgers. They played for years together. But that's still really impressive, considering he's only been there 3 games to have a 27% target share. I mean, look at how Amari Cooper's struggling. Some of these other wide receivers taking time to acclimate to their offenses. We're just not seeing it with Adams. Maybe as far as the specific timing and things like that, it wasn't quite there in those first couple of games, but we really saw what it could look like last week. He gave you over 22 fantasy points. So the main thing is the guy's getting the targets. It looks good. And yeah, the Cardinals were good. It was the Bears. We just talked about Caleb Williams, the Jekyll and Hyde. You don't know who you're getting. So that doesn't count as any sort of real feat to me. The Cardinals basically beat no one last week. They gave up 29.1 points to opposing pass catchers. That's the 7th most in fantasy football in a PPR format. So give me Mr. Davante Adams with Aaron Rodgers. Don't look now. I get it. The Jets haven't been good yet. But if you look at him over the last 5 outings, the dude's averaging 252 yards and 2 passing touchdowns per game. That is good enough to support 2 wide receivers because we also know that Garrett Wilson is amazing. So, yes, I have Adams as a borderline wide receiver 1 this weekend. Should be in almost all lineups.
Freedman, do you think the Jets could be making a run here, man? I don't want to fall into this. I understand they're 3-6. They have not been a good football team for most of the year, but Cardinals, Colts, Seahawks, Dolphins, Jaguars, and Rams coming up. I'm not saying they're going to sweep that, but man, if they rip off another 4 or 5 wins during that stretch, man, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, it could happen. I think their offense will continue to improve as Devontae Adams becomes more integrated into that system. I think the defense really is the thing that's going to let them down a little bit. You fired your defensive head coach and you moved your defensive coordinator into the head coach role. And so now you have a guy who's trying to do two different jobs, and I don't think he's able to do either of them especially well. But offensively, I think we should expect the Jets to continue to improve. And the matchup this week against the Cardinals, that's really the thing that you love. And it's good enough to where I think you could justify having Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson both ranked in the top 12, certainly top 15. So love the matchup for them. And I think this offense will continue to improve, even if that doesn't result in a lot of wins for the team overall.
Going to move over to the other sideline for our faller of the week. It is the artist known as Maserati Marv. Dwain, on our show yesterday with Chris Allen. Everyone should check it out if you haven't already. Had some fun conversations about our mid-season fantasy awards. But yeah, we, kind of settled on Sam Laporta as the biggest bust, but Marvin Harrison Jr. was right there. Yes, the Jets defense hasn't been quite as good this year. That said, they still stand as the stiffest test for opposing wide receivers in PPR points per game. So went through the consensus ranks, Dwain, and Marv did not make our top 24. How low has he actually fallen for you?
Yeah, look, I mean, he's still doing his thing as far as target share, air yards. Like, he's fine from a rookie standpoint. I still think Marvin Harrison is going to be fine for his career, Ian. But we just have the really tough matchup, and that's the challenge. I mean, we're talking about one of the best defenses in the NFL as far as holding the opposing wide receivers below their average for the season. So there's just not any reason to have to try to force Marvin there. And the big thing, man, Kyler's just continues to struggle, Ian, averaging 199 yards and 1.2 touchdown passes per game. Like, that's just not what we wanted out of the Cardinals offense. We were hoping we might have a guy throwing for 235 to 250 this year in the second year in this scheme, and that just hasn't worked out. In fact, Kyler's failed to reach even 165 yards, Ian, in 4 of 9 starts. He's only really got 2 big games where he's reached 260 or more. He obviously had that 300-yard game 2 weeks ago, but we just haven't seen enough booms, far too many bust weeks from Kyler. And really, you just put it in the middle of all that. Got a quarterback averaging 199 yards per game. Not ideal when you're trying to feed Marvin Harrison as well as Mr. Trey McBride.
I mean, the run game's been fantastic, and I think a big reason why the Cardinals are in first place in the NFC West. Pull up any advanced stat you want: yards per carry, after contact, missed tackles, forced explosive runs. They are a legit top 2 offense. But Freedman seems like, for the time being, man, the only person we can trust in this passing game is Trey McBride, and even he doesn't have a touchdown catch this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dwain touched on it. Murray has been good enough as a fantasy asset, in part because of the running ability, but he hasn't been good enough to support multiple weapons around him, which has been the disappointment. And it's not like we can just say, oh, Marvin Harrison, rookie wide receiver, maybe we shouldn't have invested in him so highly, because the situation could have worked out significantly better. And again, to Dwain's point, he's gotten the underlying usage. All of that is good. It's just not connecting yet. And maybe that starts to improve in the second half of the season. But this week, going against a Jets defense that isn't as good as it used to be, but still is conservatively top 8 in the league against the pass, I think it's a situation where if you have him, you're probably starting Marvin Harrison, but you just don't really like it. You don't feel good about it.
I'm calling it now. Dwain's utilization report, week 11, Marvin Harrison Jr. buy low, because after that buy, they get the Seahawks, Vikings, Seahawks, Patriots, Panthers, and Rams. So now when Dwain gives you guys a ton of great information, just remember he got all that and stole it from me. Okay, so guys, this year though, Marvin Harrison Jr., more PPR points per game than Tyreek Hill, which is just really sad for both of them once you actually realize they're both outside the top 36. But let's go to a more positive note. Again, Freedman just saving us here with his favorites. Guys we can really trust, guys we can depend on. Cowboys wide receiver, Jalen Tolbert. Go off, Freedman.
All right, look, I got done dirty by the producers on this one. All right.
Quit blaming them.
Here's what happened. Here's what happened. All right. Monday night, I'm thinking, all right, CeeDee Lamb is going to be out. Yes, there's a big drop off from Dak Prescott to backup quarterback Cooper Rush. If you look at our FantasyLife QB against the spread value chart, the drop off from Prescott to Cooper Rush is 5.5 points against the spread. Like, massive downgrade for everyone in that Cowboys offense. But I was thinking, if CeeDee Lamb is out, or if CeeDee Lamb is playing but is very limited, there's really no one else in that offense. They can't run the ball. They're going to be down, weather, November, but at least they're playing indoors. So decent environment. Maybe that means extra targets for Jalen Tolbert. And it's not as if all we do is chase targets, but if you had to say, hey, what's the number one predictor of a fantasy wide receiver going off? It's probably targets. And this week, I think we could see extra targets for Jalen Tolbert. He has steadily improved since his rookie season this year, 5.4 targets per game, 8.2 yards per target. I think that makes him like a viable desperado flyer if you're just in this situation where you're thinking, all right, like some guys are on bye, I need someone who's on waivers. I feel like Jalen Tolbert could be that guy because maybe he bumps up from 5.4 targets on average this week to maybe 7 or 8. And in that case, maybe he's a little bit intriguing, especially going against an Eagles defense that could be without number one cornerback Darius Slay. The Cowboys could have to throw a lot. Again, I don't think Cooper Rush is that good of a quarterback, but at least he knows the system and has been with the team, might have better chemistry with some of the wide receivers than you would otherwise anticipate. So Jalen Tolbert, and really, I will just say, I was kind of trying to out-sicko Dwain when I was thinking about the lower tier guys in Freedman's favorites this week. I was thinking, like, who is going to be so disgusting that even Dwain would be like, nah, I can't go there. And of course, I had to pick a Cowboy. So that's where I went, Jalen Tolbert. He's the sickoest guy that you could conceivably go with starting in your lineup this week.
Congrats, you got me, Freedman.
I was about to say, I think you win this round, Freedman. Desperado flyer, man. I think you need to come to your senses there. A few people might have got that one. Dwain, sicko start. Panthers wide receiver. Xavier Legette, I guess the wide receiver one in Carolina now.
Well, look, in under 14% of starting lineups right now over in Yahoo. He's so far down, I can't see him on the list. So he's somewhere down there below 14%. That's the lowest guy I can see on Yahoo. He is available in 67% of leagues. So again, you got 4 teams on bye. There's a chance you might need a player like Xavier Legette. So he's got a 6.8 utilization score, Ian, in the last 2 games without Deontay Johnson. One of those, Johnson was traded the game before. He missed maybe with a phantom injury, some might say, waiting to be traded. But that's enough that we could eventually be talking about him as soon as next week as being a guy we're upgrading in the utilization report to wide receiver 3 status. That 6.8 score puts him squarely in that conversation. And then if you just look at it, 22% target share over that stretch, Ian, 34% air yard share, and averaging, importantly, 13.8 fantasy points per game. So he's been a usable piece in these games without Deontay Johnson. Now, we could get Adam Thielen back this weekend, but if you really go back and you look at it, Jalen Coker was the guy really getting more used in the Adam Thielen role. Also, we have Jonathan Mingo get moved on to the Cowboys. I forgot to ask Freedman, is he worried about Jonathan Mingo coming in and stealing targets from Mr. Jalen Tolbert, or is this just a Spider-Man meme of those two guys looking at each other saying we're the same thing? But with Legette, I think you put it all together. I think he's going to be on the field plenty. And you've brought it up, Ian. Bryce Young playing a little better. Now, we haven't necessarily seen a big, box score passing from him, but we'll take what we can get that Bryce Young has been playing better. So yeah, I've got Legette as a borderline. Well, actually, I've got him as a mid-range wide receiver 4, but I think he gives you wide receiver 3 potential if you're hurting. And we know, guys, we are all hurting at the wide receiver position this week due to all the injuries in the bye week. So Legette's a guy you could use.
Sticking with the Panthers just for a second, we just got news that the Panthers have extended one of their young stars. Our Jonathan Brooks bags are down so bad. Chuba Hubbard, 4 years, $33 million extension. Dwain, wow. I don't think Brooks is getting that workhorse role, man.
No, he's not. He's not getting the workhorse load. It's Jover. Yeah, you're talking about a timeshare guy, which is not, look, we're used to this. Most backfields in the NFL are timeshares now, and that's what we're now going to see with this thing moving forward. I'm just going over to our guillotine league right now and trying to see. I saw that Hubbard was available yesterday, so I'm trying to beat Freedman to it right now.
Just, anytime you can draft a running back in the second round who's not going to play the first 3 months of the year and then extend your backup running back with $33 million, just another example of great organization staying great down there in Carolina. So let's go ahead and finish things off with tight end. First, we'll give a quick little overview of the top options at the position because we will have several playing here again in that aforementioned Bengals, Ravens hopeful shootout. Mike Gesicki coming in as our tight end 6, Mark Andrews, tight end 7, usual suspects rounding rounding out the top 5. Dalton Kincaid, Jake Ferguson, Jonnu Smith in that every down role, and more targets than Jalen Waddle this season, lo and behold, rounding out the top 10, and even coming in as our tight end 12, TJ Hawkinson. So Freedman, not exactly seeing the guy we're going to be talking about for you in the top 12. That said, I personally have him in my top 8. Talk about Taysom Hill, Freedman, in a reasonable enough matchup as essentially the only healthy playmaker in the Saints offense other than Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that as a staff, we don't have Taysom Hill in the top 12, but he's not a traditional tight end. And in any given week, could you see Taysom Hill have like only 2 carries and 0 targets? Yeah, that could always happen. But, the tight end position is a little bit bereft. Some guys are on bye, and that matchup, all of it works. First of all, wide receivers, Rashid Shaheed, Bub Means, they're out. Number 1 wide receiver, Chris Olave, very uncertain with a concussion. I'm pretty skeptical he plays this week. And then given that all of those guys are out, Hill could earn more targets. Last week, he had a season high 47% route rate. He translated that into 31% target rate, 19% target share, had 41 yards receiving on 5 targets. And then at the running back position, you mentioned Kendre Miller on IR. Running back Jamal Williams was out last week, could also be out this week. And that means, Alvin Kamara, really the only other established runner on this team. So Hill could get extra carries. Some of those could be near the goal line where he's been pretty effective last week without Miller and Williams. Hill had 5 carries, 19 yards rushing, and a touchdown. And then Hill has 101 yards and a touchdown on 9 targets, 9 carries in the 2 games since returning in week 8 from injury against the Falcons in week 4. And that was a game that he left early because of injury, played only 15 snaps, but they used him heavily. Like, he was a key part of that game plan against the Falcons. 6 carries, 24 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. The Falcons, number 31 in defensive rush success rate. I think that means Hill, once again, as a runner, could have success against the Falcons. And because of all the injuries on that team, he could have extra targets coming his way as well.
Taysom Hill, again, for me, Dwain, someone that would be in my top 8, but consensusly, we do have TJ Hawkinson beating him as our tight end 12 of the week. Amazing matchup, and even though his usage wasn't fully great in his first game back, we would expect to take a step forward here in week 10.
Yeah, I cheated on this one a little bit. Technically, you shouldn't be able to use TJ Hawkinson as a sicko start, but how many times can I name Zach Ertz in this spot of the column? He's only in 30% of starting lineups, so I took the chance to use that. The rule of thumb is if they're 40% or below, I'm willing to use them, for the piece. But when you look at Hawkinson, to your point, he didn't have the full-time role, but 60% route participation in his first game back. Like, that's a positive. We like guys that are 75 to 80%, so he's closer than that. He's closer to that number than he is further away. There was a chance he was only out there like 30% of the time last week. So I thought the 60% number was really encouraging. This is a guy that's been a strong target earner over the course of his career, especially in this scheme with Kevin O'Connell. So yeah, he's a guy that I'm willing to take a risk on, betting on, him actually continuing to move forward. And even if he doesn't, let's say he's at 60% again, but he comes in with like a 22% targets per route run, that's still probably going to be enough to make him a low-end tight end 1 this week at worst. So I've moved him up to tight end 10. I believe that's where you also have him in your ranks as well.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, full tight end rankings you can find at FantasyLife.com. You can also check out our start sit tool, which will help you guys, again, make those, trickier decisions. And accordingly, we're going to be going through a few start sit questions from our Fantasy Life Discord, which is free, and we invite you to join that. Myself, Dwain, amongst others, always getting in there for about an hour per week and answering anything on your mind. So kicking things off, guys, Brian Thomas Jr. or DeAndre Hopkins? Dwain, what say you?
I'm going BTJ as long as he looks good on the injury report. I like what Hopkins did last week, but I think he's got the tougher matchup, and BTJ, the young ascending talent, I want him in my lineup.
And Dwain, in this matchup, right, I mean, you would think he might have a chance, to get maybe down the sideline against this heavy cover 2 defense, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think, there's a chance that you hit that honey hole right there. When you look at what Brian Thomas can do, his skill set, yeah, I think it's totally on the table.
Plot twist. Freedman, I don't care about your opinion. Everyone, this is Freedman's honey collection. This is in the mind of a serial, person, you could say. Don't want to get YouTube mad at us, but yep, honey everywhere. Explain yourself, Freedman. That's like 30 jars.
I mean, look, it's nature's goodness. I don't know why more people don't have obscene honey collections. All right. I mean, look, it's a nice little snack, working. It's like, oh, I'm starting to get a little bit tired. Just walk 10 feet to the kitchen, get a little spoon, dip it in one of the honey jars. All of a sudden, good to go for another 30 minutes. I mean, honey just like my season 100% fueled by honey consumption. Really, if all I had for the rest of my life was honey and then other food to supplement, I would be good.
I prefer peanut butter personally, Freedman. But yeah, I like honey too.
We know. We've heard.
Right. We need a honey sponsor. Taysom Hill or Jake Ferguson? Freedman, what say you?
I mean, I just talked about Taysom Hill, but then it's like, Ferguson. Do I want to go with Ferguson? Yes. I probably would. In theory, no CeeDee Lamb. So yeah, he should be the guy who's getting a lot of usage. But if CeeDee Lamb is out there, then I'm probably going to want to go with Taysom Hill.
I'm Taysom Hill, Dwain. What about you?
Yeah, I'm good on Taysom Hill.
Yeah. Okay. George Kittle or Kate Otten? I think the answer is just yes, but probably Kittle. Fellas, we agree.
It's Kittle. He's the number 1 tight end in fantasy. Like, I get it. I really like Kate Otten. He's number 3. Yes on both. Flex Kate Otten.
Let's test the Freedman's favorite. Kyler Murray or Daniel Jones, Freedman?
Oh my God.
Daniel Jones.
He's pausing.
I'm going with Daniel Jones.
That's so close. Dwain?
Freedman's going to have to adjust his ranks for sure, I think. I don't think he actually has that represented that way. I'm going Kyler Murray, but I get where Freedman's coming from. And maybe I should just go Daniel Jones. I mean, are they that different? They both run. They both don't throw for a lot of yards. And Daniel Jones has got a better matchup. Maybe I'm the idiot here.
I'm looking. I have Daniel Jones 14, Kyler Murray 17. So,
wow.
Nice,
Freedman.
I'm going with
your money
going with Daniel
mouth
Jones.
Is. All right.
A man of the people. Last one, guys. Dwain, I'm going to name some running backs, and you just hit me with if you would or would not start them ahead of the hopefully returning Christian McCaffrey. So, Joe Mixon.
Starting Mixon.
Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones.
DeAndre Swift.
Swift.
What?
Yeah.
Over CMC?
Swift's he's getting 68% of the. I don't know what CMC's workload is going to be. That's about the line, though.
He's been sitting on our IR this whole season, and now you want to go ahead and just bench CMC for DeAndre Swift.
No, keep going. Give me another name.
J.K. Dobbins.
That's what we're doing here. I'll start CMC. That's
Hunt.
The spot. I have CMC.
Okay, Dwayne's got CMC, just not over DeAndre Swift. I remain outraged. So when the producer plays that music, that means I need to shut the heck up. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here, everyone. Join Dwayne and myself tomorrow, Friday, for our injury goodness. But otherwise, ace those Thursday night matchups and hopefully go into your weekend with a nice little lead. So for Freedman, for Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.